Numbers, prayers, checks.
Duke Al Durham from Cardiff has suffered from OCD since the age of 12. He uses poetry and rapping to deal with his condition.
I'm so afraid to tell people because intrusive thoughts, they're not nice, you know. Afraid of the stigma, afraid people think I was crazy. So my brain told my hand told the pen, and the pen told the page. And I was able to articulate how I felt through rhyme.
Until the age of 21, Duke tackled his OCD pretty much on his own and used binge drinking as a coping mechanism. On one night out, Duke experienced a horrendous intrusive thought, which is still too painful for him to share. He didn't want to fight his OCD anymore, and then a taxi passed by.
I just felt like I wanted to silence my mind. I was on the pavement and then I sort of timed it correctly and purposely walked out in front of the road. I smashed onto the bonnet, I smashed onto the windscreen and then smashed my face on the floor, and I laid there and all I did hear was silence.
Steve Turnock's mild OCD began when he was only 6 years old. He regularly checked taps were turned off and washed his hands. But when Steve was 54 years old, his OCD became severe whilst he was on holiday in Southeast Asia.
All sorts of very unusual, unexplainable thoughts started to creep into my mind about, have I harmed people? It was in the most unusual of circumstances, whether it was in a toilet or a restaurant, or indeed walking around temples. I was imagining that I'd knocked people off of temples, so I was looking around in the bushes at the bottom of temples to see that there wasn't a body lying there.
Steve attended a 12-week recovery programme at the Priory in Altrincham. It incorporated group sessions and exposure and response prevention therapy, where he had to gradually face his obsessions and resist doing compulsions. Steve clinically recovered in 2018, but 2 years later, his OCD came back with a vengeance.
Anytime I put anything in the bin, whether it was a tea bag or a sweet wrapper or food off of a plate, I would think that I have put a baby in the bin.
Throwing one thing in the bin could take Steve half an hour.
I'd look at it in my hand first of all, I'd sort of walk up gingerly to the bin, I'd place it in the bin, hoping that it didn't slip down the side. If it did slip down the side and I couldn't then see it, I'd be emptying the bin out either onto the floor or into another bin.
Steve knew what life was like without OCD, and he was determined to get that back. So he completed more exposure and response prevention therapy and now lives happily as a dad, granddad, husband and avid cyclist.
The biggest sensations I have is when I'm cycling past a place where I know I've had a meltdown before, and sometimes I allow myself a little smile to go, okay, that's where I was looking down the drain to see if I'd knock somebody down there.
The main two treatments for OCD are cognitive behavioural therapy and medication, but they only work for 60% of patients, according to experts from the University of Hertfordshire. Nick Serow has suffered from the disorder for around 30 years and founded Orchard OCD to develop new and better treatments. The charity's raised around £120,000 to fund a study into treating patients with psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms that works as a fast-acting antidepressant.
What we're trying to see in an entirely controlled laboratory setting is whether this helps patients become more flexible in their thinking and then to engage with therapy.
Whilst new treatments are being developed, I returned to see someone who fought against her OCD but was never able to beat it. Hi Mum, how are you? Hi, I'm good. I'm just back from uni. I'm making a radio documentary on OCD, and you know, you'd always tell me if there was something I was struggling with, put on your brave badge, and that always helped. But I think you were always wearing your brave badge, and you were so brave, braver than I even recognised at the time, and you'll always be such an inspiration to me. I love you.